Welcome all to this panel on the Demon Rift universe. And Eric is going to start us off with a few comments about how it all started.
Well, introduce yourself first, Gorg, and Paula too.
I'm Gorg Huff. This is Paula Goodlett. And the guy down in the corner is Eric Flint. He's going to start us off with a few comments about the origins of the Demon Rift universe.
All right. The Demon Rift series so far has two novels out in it, The Demons of Paris and The Demons of Constantinople. And Gorg and Paula have just written another story set in that same setting, the title of which this is written by them. I'm not a writer on that one. And what's the title of that one?
The working title at this point is Stories from the Demon Rift World,
okay,
I think.
All right. We'll change that.
Yeah.
We always let you pick the titles, Eric, because ours are rotten.
Right. Well, yeah.
I have written many books with Gorg and Paula, and they've written a number on their own. And I have to say, if there was an Olympic event and coming up with the worst titles for books, they'd be contenders for the gold. I always wind up coming up with something new. Anyway, we are going to be continuing this series. There's going to be, I'm not quite sure how far we're going to go, but we're having fun with it. So we are going to keep going. What I will start with is explaining how it originated. It originated with an idea that I had, oh God, I don't know how long ago. It's been a long, long time when I came up with it, like 20 years, 30 years, I don't know. Long time ago, I came up with the idea that it'd be interesting to develop a fantasy series where the basic premise is that in the late 14th century, when Tamerlane was doing his conquests in Central Asia, which were notoriously bloody, that in one of the massacres that his army carried out, which they did pretty often, there was a religious figure. I had it in my original idea as being a shaman of some kind. Once learning more about the history, I'm pretty sure it's going to be an Islamic religious figure. Brings down issues a curse on Tamerlane. And in this particular world, that curse, because there's so much blood being spilled, the curse winds up having the power of a blood curse, and it actually works. Except it doesn't work the way the cleric intended it to work. What actually happens is it tears open a rift between our universe and a universe that is inhabited by demons of various kinds. And into that rift, the demons start pouring into our universe. And the rift starts running geographically down a line that we haven't fully determined yet, and we're not going to yet, because, to be honest, what's going to determine where it goes, being honest about it, is what would work best for fiction. So we'll figure it out as we go. As I've said a number of times, writing fiction is a lot more like making sausage than some people want to admit it is. Anyway, so that was the basic idea, and that what would happen is the story would actually begin in Western Europe when demons got that far, so something triggered off the interest in Western Europe, and would happen probably originally in France. And the second thing that would happen as that rift spread was that it would also tear a hole in the future, a little bitty one, once it reached Paris, and would pull into this new universe being created a van full of students, teenagers, from a private, very ritzy private school in Paris called the American Community School. That school, I think we renamed it a bit, but I actually attended that school when I was a kid. I lived in France for 5 years between the ages of 5 and 10. And I actually attended that school. It's a very good school, and it has the kids tend to come from wealthy families. In those days, my dad had a lot of money. In those days, he blew it later, but in those days, he was rich. And so, number one, the rich kids, that's important for a reason I'll explain in a second. And the other is a lot of international kids there because basically a lot of kids whose, at least one of whose languages is English rather than French, would rather go to that school and go to one of the French schools. And so that's how those modern kids get pulled into the story. And that's where it sat for years. I didn't do anything with it. I just had the idea. And then some years later, I got to know Paul and Gore through the 1632 series. We started writing novels together in that series, which we have now done 3, I think.
3 in that series. Yeah, 3 in that series.
3 in that series. And then we started a spin-off series called The Alexander Inheritance. And we've done 2 in that series, The Alexander Inheritance and a Macedonian Hazard, which is coming out in January, which is, by the way, a very good series that you all ought to rush out and buy the Alexander Inheritance.
Right after you buy the Demons of Paris
Right
and the
after
Demons
you buy
of...
Demons of Paris and Demons of Constantinople, exactly. So, and then they had started writing stuff of their own. Originally started stories they were writing in 1632 universe, and then they started writing stories of their own in worlds that they created and settings that they created. And Ring of Fire Press has now published a number of them. And by the way, these are all good books, and you should also get their books. I'm not directly involved as a writer. I give them some advice now and then, but these are their projects. And they're both really good writers, especially they work together as a team. Anyway, so once that all happened, I raised this idea with Gorg and Paula, and they thought the idea was interesting. It'd be interesting and fun to work on. So they got started, and they were the arrangement they have is the arrangement we have in all of our books now, which is they will write the first draft. Once we work out the whole story together, they'll write the first draft, and then I will do whatever is needed to finish it up. Sometimes that involves quite a bit of writing, other times it really doesn't. It just involves me essentially functioning as a macro editor, I guess you'd call it. Now, what happened once we started that, and I'm going to let them pick it up very soon, is they introduced something I hadn't foreseen in the series at all, which is the reason the fact these kids are rich is relevant is that all these kids in this van are loaded to the gills with state-of-the-art, top-line electronic gadgetry. You know, tablets, cell phones, laptops, you name it, and they've got a lot of it. And as it turns out, by the way, I need to explain that they can go into more detail. The term demons isn't necessarily a moral term. These demons come in all kinds of flavors ethically. Some of them really are incredibly evil, vicious monsters, but not all of them are. Many of them are just, critters that have a different, very different life than human beings do. But it turns out that a lot of demons really, really love modern electronic gadgetry. And that's what Gorg and Paula brought into this. I hadn't foreseen, and it turned it into this, I think, really enjoyable, fascinating universe that I've never seen done in fantasy anywhere else, except in our series. I may have missed something because I don't read every single thing written, but I've never seen it at least. So with that, I will turn it over to them to explain where they got that idea and what they did with it.
Okay, well, a little bit. It's not quite that dependent on them being super rich, but they do have good gear. but that's because everybody has good gear these days. We get up to a little later in the 21st century, and phones are ubiquitous. Everybody has terabytes and this and that and the other thing in their computers. A good school providing good computers, everybody's got lots of computers. The thing that we sort of happened on by accident was the basic nature of the demonic kind, which was in their own world, they don't have much control over their shape or their form, that they get forced into a form by a more powerful demon, or they spend a great deal of their energy trying to maintain a form. And when they get pulled into the natural world, they take up the form and the characteristics of the thing they're pulled into. If they're pulled into a statue of a griffin, they take on the attitudes of a griffin. If they're pulled into an axe, they take on the attitudes of an axe. But these demons get pulled into high quality electronic equipment that have something approaching a brain of their own, but don't have a personality of their own to contend with. And that has the advantages of being pulled into a cat or a dog without the disadvantages of always having to be fighting for control with the cat or the dog. So the demons love that. It's like having a massive mansion to live in. And especially Pukorl, who is the first demon that picks up the van full of teenagers, because the guy who was calling him into the world was so incompetent that he didn't even know he was supposed to put a vessel in the pentagram that he was calling the demon into. So the demon gets there, he picks up the van, and the van, which is this really great thing for him, also happens to be owned. And one of the rules of the demon world is that the owner of the container owns the demon as long as he's in the container. And that makes it a difficult situation for Pukorl. And that is what leads into the story. And the rest of it sort of flows from that. You want to take up this, Paula?
Actually, you were doing really well with it. We didn't like the idea of the demons always being bad. So we kind of transferred the idea that there are brownies in mythology, there are gods in mythology, there are so many, many other things in mythology. And in this particular series, they all live in the netherworld. But when the rift came, when the veil between the worlds was shredded, they could start doing other things, and they did. And it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a very, very entertaining series to work in. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, I'm going to take a short break from us talking and listen to us writing, and let's see if this works.
Is it working?
Can you hear it?
I can hear it, but I can't hear.
I can't.
Huh? I can hear something, Gord, but it's not.
Hold on. How's that?
Not enough to make out what it is.
Nothing here.
Okay. Well, it was worth a try. Paula and I, as Eric mentioned, have written another story that isn't exactly in the line of stories. It's not Demons of Paris, Demons of Constantinople, Demons of Alexandria. It's sort of off to the side. And it deals with some of the stuff that's going on amongst the demons and in the netherworld as the major heroes. Also, in the netherworld, as the major heroes are doing the major heroic stuff, it's about the other people. And in this case, those other people include the King of France, who decides that he wants all that gold that's in America, the King of England, who decides that he wants all that gold that's in America, Pucurl, and how he deals with the sudden acquisition of the lands of the evil demon. I can never pronounce this.
Yeah, you are the guy, you are the ones who came up with that name. So, you know, I mean.
Okay, this is, it's not our fault. Demon names, as it turns out, are very long and complex. And the more powerful the demon or the titan or the celestial being, the longer and more complex the name is, because demon names act a little like passwords. The longer and more complicated they are, the more secure they are. And if you've got a short, simple name, somebody's going to use your name and put you in chains.
I understand the logic work, but it's still.
Yeah, I know. But it's not my fault.
Yeah, I know.
Or at least that's my story, and I'm sticking.
But nobody can pronounce the name of that particular evil demon that's in the Demons of Paris. That demon is the sort of the big bad of that book. There's sort of two of them. There's him and Philip the Bold, who's the younger son of the King of France, and he's a treacherous, no good, rotten guy, especially once he forms an alliance with this demon.
Right.
The former King of France, the younger brother of the current king. Philip the Bold is the younger brother of Charles V.
Right.
So it was the former King of France was his father.
Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah. Right. And that's basically one of the big things that Philip the Bold objects to is that his father, and this is, I believe, historically accurate, his father actually wanted Philip the Bold to inherit the throne, but he couldn't do it, which is why they got Charles V rather than Philip. And Philip was his father's favorite and believed himself to be entitled. He, in our history, never rebelled. He criticized a lot, but never actually rebelled. And he treated Charles's son with considerable disrespect, but again, never actually rebelled. So,
okay, so we slandered, and by the way, these are all real historical figures that we use. So we apparently, according to what Gord just said, slandered a prince of France who's been dead for 600 and some, not quite 700 years. So
we're not overly worried about the law, sir.
Probably past the statute of limitations for being, sued for defamation of character. Yeah. Okay. There are, by the way, as I do it when I write author history, I try as much as possible to use real historical figures, and we're doing the same thing in this because, among other things, this series is also alternate history. Although, because of the fantasy element, it gets to be alternate history and it gets changed a lot pretty quickly. But so all of these characters are real historical figures, but one in particular we have in there, which was a lot of fun to work with, is the guy who was the constable of France at the time. And due to
Bertrand de Goustelin.
And he was a real figure, and he was a fascinating figure in history, and we have had a lot of fun work with him, including his wife Tiffany, who is an astrologer. And what drives these modern teenagers nuts is that they begin realizing that in this new world created by these demons, her astrology is actually pretty damn accurate. which they have a hard time accepting for quite a while. Anyhow, where the story begins is in Paris, and it begins with a murder, a gruesome murder that is being investigated by the equivalent, the medieval equivalent of, this is the High Middle Ages, the medieval equivalent of the police chief of Paris. And just from the nature of basically the blood splatter, which he doesn't think there's any way any human could have done this particular murder, he begins to suspect that some supernatural force is stalking the streets of Paris. And so he goes to a professor. The University of Paris Sorbonne is already up and running, and to get his advice. And that's where you start bringing in the human knowledge, such as it is, or their speculations about sorcery, which rapidly become more than speculations because it turns out that it's real. And eventually what happens is the teenagers arrive, and it's the constable, Bernard de Bousclin, who's the one who figures out quickly that they're probably going to be pretty useful. So he keeps them from being, roasted alive. And they get him hooked up with the professor and other people, and they start looking in to see what's happening. And all through book one, and all through the next book, and for at least one more book to come, they really don't understand what's causing all this to happen. In other words, what has produced this rift in the first place, and why all of a sudden do you have these demons, some of whom are real monsters, others of whom are just little imps. Some of them are pretty benign, but why all of a sudden has all this started happening? And so the basic plot of the whole series, but it begins in this first novel, The Demons of Paris, is that a band of companions, we'll call it for lack of a better term, forms that includes both people from the 21st century as well as people from the 14th century that start searching to find out what's the cause of all this, and is there anything that can be done about it. And then in the first book, this gets mixed up in the civil war that erupts in France when the younger son is trying to overthrow his brother and become the new king. And he becomes very powerful because he seizes, basically manages to kidnap a Titan, Themis, who is a Titan, which is essentially pretty close to a god.
It is a god.
Yeah, of ancient times, and so he has her powers, which are he basically folds into a sword, which makes him immensely powerful. And that's, I'm not going to throw any spoilers in there, but that's kind of what sets up the conflict in the first book. And then at the conclusion of the first book, our heroes are not, for a variety of reasons, which you'll have to read Demons of Paris to find out. Our heroes are not in the good graces of the King of France. And they decide that A, it would be wise for them to just get out of France, and B, they need to, or Bertrand de Bousclin and the people, other people really want to find out what the hell's going on. So they all set off and they go on an expedition to Constantinople, where the professor has a colleague of his who he thinks might be able to help him. And that's how the second book gets kicked off. So I will turn it back over to you guys, and if you will, explain some of the premises of what happens in The Demons of Constantinople.
Well, again, there is the issue of royal incompetence, which seems to have been ubiquitous historically about this time. The Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire, was pretty much on its last legs. And it was on its last legs because basically its rulers were treating it as their own personal property and arguing about it and getting in fights over the will and being so busy trying to cut each other's throat that they didn't really notice that they were being gobbled up by both the Christian powers to the west and the Muslim powers, specifically the Ottoman Empire from the south and east. And they were not competent people, nor were they particularly sane people historically. And when we drop our characters and functional magic into that world, especially considering that our characters have been studying magic and learning how to combine it with technology for the past several months, they come into Constantinople as both very useful and very threatening. And I don't know how much of the plot spoilers we want to do here, but they end up saving the Byzantine Empire, at least for the moment, and then they get thrown out of Constantinople too.
Yeah, they wind up, they solve problems as they go along, but they tend to step on a lot of
Royal appendages.
Particularly royal toes. It's not just royal toes. You got to remember, this is also the era of very, very powerful churches. You've got the Catholic Church in the West, in France, but now they're in the Byzantine Empire, and you're dealing with the Eastern Church, the Orthodox Church. And regardless of which religion you're dealing with, and it's not going to change much when we start running into Muslim religious leaders. They tend not to look favorably upon this combination of people from modern times, plus their accompanying demons, because they got demons with them now, lots of them, accompanying demons, allies, and then plus they're picking up people from the era. They got Bernard de Guesclin, a bunch of his military people and companions, his wife. They're going to pick up some more people in Constantinople. And from there, they're going to head down to Egypt, to Cairo. That will be the next book, the adventures they have in Egypt as they try to find out if the great Muslim scholars of the time can figure out anything or have learned anything. One of the things that happens in the series, because of the premises on which it's set up, there's a lot of really nifty things you can do. One of them is that one of the demons that sort of merges with their ship, their boat, is a kraken. So they've got a boat that's sort of part boat and part sort of giant squid, and the kraken has opinions of his own as to what ought to be done, which don't necessarily coincide with the people that are writing in the boat that he's also part of. So anyway, a lot of interesting things develop. And plus, because they're teenagers, they're encountering other teenagers, and some romantic involvements get started. And those teenagers from the 14th century are every bit as rambunctious as teenagers anywhere. And so their attitudes get mixed into it. And by the time we get to the end of Demons of Constantinople, it's gotten very lively.
Okay.
I mean, it honestly is.
That's the fun part.
Yes.
A fun series to write. It really is. One of the things that happened when we done the first book is I took it to a couple of major commercial publishers, first Main Books and then Tor, and Tony, the publisher of Bane, wanted some changes done in it, and I understood why she wanted the changes done. It wasn't that I thought she was wrong. I mean, I understood the logic of them, and but I didn't really want to do it. So then I took it over to an editor whom I like at Tor Books, but she had pretty much exactly the same view of it that Tony did, and proposed exactly the same changes. And I didn't really want to do them. I understood the logic of them, and you know, it was probably conventional wisdom to have done what they wanted, but I just enjoyed the way it was. So I went back to Gorg and Paula and explained, you know, how the negotiations had gone. And I said, what do you guys want to do? And they didn't want to change it either, because we were all having fun with the basic shaped it. So by that, I had Ring of Fire Press up and running. So we decided, hell, we'll just publish it ourselves. And so this is a series that you have 3 authors who are pretty much unrestrained
Okay,
by
I should,
outside forces to do whatever they want. And it really produces a series that is quirky. I can pretty much predict that you'll find it often unpredictable, but which at least we think is a lot of fun. And because of the constant involvement of the interaction between demons and modern
technology.
intelligence, you get all kinds of combinations and plot developments and possibilities that at least I've never encountered anywhere else in any other fantasy story I've ever read. I'm not saying no one's done it, because, you know, there's a lot of stuff written that I haven't read, but I've never seen it anyway. We don't know yet exactly where the ending of the series will obviously eventually involve a confrontation. Oh, Tamerlane, by the way, one of the first things that happened was that Tamerlane himself was possessed by a really, really powerful demon. So Tamerlane is a super, super bad guy at this point. And he was already ferocious enough.
And we get to kill him.
Huh?
Did we? Are we
I said,
gonna
and
kill
we
him?
get to kill him.
Did the demon
Probably.
kill him? Did we decide that?
You know, I like killing the bad guy.
All right, fine. So
I don't know.
basically, it's the demon who now, but people don't realize that, so he still has Tamerlane's authority. And by the way, if people aren't very familiar with the character of Tamerlane, he was a descendant of Genghis Khan. It was one of the branches. He could trace his ancestry to that. And his dynasty, the Timurids, eventually are the ones who produced Babur the Tiger, who went to India and founded the Mughal Empire in India. So, I mean, this was a possibly the most successful dynastic line in all of history, even more than the Habsburgs in Europe. So the point is that Tamerlane was a very powerful figure anyway in real history, and now that this demon has essentially replaced him, but people don't realize that. He's a serious bad guy. So they will eventually wind up having to deal with him, but exactly how long it's going to take and when, to be perfectly honest, it will depend on how much fun we're having. And, you know, and also you have to keep an eye out and make sure sales are okay. So far, they're fine. You know, eventually you just can't afford to keep going. But we're going to be going with this for a while. I'm pretty sure. Because it's just too much fun not to. And the other thing about it that I enjoyed, because, you know, is I presume people who are coming and watching this are aware I write a lot of alternate history. And one of the things, if you write historical fiction in general and alternate history as well, that is a problem that you have to deal with as an author, is that most of your audience is going to be Western. and they often don't know anything at all worth talking about the history period, especially if they're American, and the history of large parts of the world. And for me, because that's what I always like to study, it's a lot of fun in fiction to be able to explore and depict those worlds, but you also have to figure out a way to do it where you're not losing people. I mean, I don't want, I hate to be crude about it, but it's a simple marketing issue. If you write a historical fiction book that has no hook, so to speak, that most of your potential readers can relate to, it's going to be hard to sell the book. It's just that simple. And the worlds that we're exploring, medieval France, this is the high Middle Ages, the late 14th century. We start in 1372, am I right? That's
Yeah.
start, yeah, 1372. That period is sort of known, not real well, but it is sort of known. But then once you move over to the Eastern, what was still in those days, the Eastern Roman Empire, and Constantinople, and then you're going to start dealing, in fact, we do in Demons of Constantinople, we're dealing with the Ottoman Empire, the Turks at the same time. And now we're going to be going into Egypt, which in those days was at the center of the Muslim world. You're now entering a part of history that most of our readers don't know anything about. And then from there, we're going to be moving further east, probably into North India, which is before the period of the Mughal Empire. So it's a period that people who come from India and Pakistan know about it, but most American readers don't know squat about it. So and then there's the history of Central Asia, which they know even less about. So, however, because of the way we're doing it, we do have a hook that can pull people in, which is it's also a really nifty, lively fantasy series. So, yeah, you may not know much about this history, but you don't know anything. You didn't know anything about the history of the Middle Earth before Tolkien pulled you into it. And so just follow us along and we will introduce you, among other things, to all kinds of really nifty historical stuff. Because this whole period of the it was called the High Middle Ages, or the Late Middle Ages, but that's in Western Europe. It didn't have those terms elsewhere. But that whole period in history, 14th century, was just fascinating. Partly because this is not long after the Black Death. It's about one generation after the Black Death went through. It didn't just go through Europe, went through the whole world. So there's all kinds of changes. So if you enjoy alternate history, you should probably enjoy this as well, as long as you don't have an antipathy to fantasy, because there's a lot of fantasy in it. There's no, I mean, it is basically fantasy. All right. To back up, one of the things that's happening in the series is one of the major characters is the first demon we encounter, Pukorl, who's just he's not a big demon. He's pretty much small fry.
He's a puck, a Robin Hood fellow.
Yeah, he's a puck, which is a type of demon that's kind of puckish, but he's not particularly powerful. But he's the one who gets essentially sucked in. He gets pulled into this rift that pulls down the kids and their teacher from modern Paris in this van, and he gets pulled into it, and he grabs onto the van. And so that seems like a smart move when he did it. And then he discovers that first of all, he's actually the property of the teacher because she owns the van. And this van's a very, very different. He's used to being in like an axe or a shovel or, and all of a sudden he's in this modern, really nifty, fancy, huge van. This is not a minivan. This is the kind of big van that hauls kids around. And he starts exploring the possibilities. And one of the teenagers is, she's an auto mechanic. And so the two of them start modifying the van, but that also means modifying Pukorl, the puck, as we go along. And because a demon will absorb the strength and powers of a demon if it destroys it, in the course of adventures, I will not relate because I don't want to spoil the pleasure. Those of you I'm sure will be rushing out to buy the Demons of Paris. That, by the way, is the cover of it. So
That's actually an old cover of it.
Spoilers, but let's just say that as the series progresses, this modest little puck of a demon who is also this van, and both the van and he start getting bigger and bigger and more powerful as we go along. I do not have available, that's the cover of the first book, Demons of Paris. The great artist Larry Dixon did this one, and Larry also did the cover for the second book, Demons of Constantinople. And I can't display it, but you will see that the van depicted, who's right there on the cover, and you can see what that cover looks like really easily. Just go to our catalog at Ring of Fire Press and look it up, because it's right there, and right next to it is a button you can push to buy it. So it's all very easy, but you will see that that van, Pukorl in that van, has become a lot more impressive by the time he gets to Constantinople, and especially after what happens in Constantinople, than he was when he started. So for him, it's a coming of age story just as much as it is for these teenagers. And coming of age stories, if there's any single, I don't know how to put it, if there's any single trope or formula for a storyteller that is as close to surefire as it ever gets, coming of age stories. I mean, for some reason, the human race seems to be hardwired to really enjoy watching youngsters become adults. I don't know why exactly, because if you're undergoing the process, which I did, like everyone does, it's often not a lot of fun, to put it mildly.
Well, adventure is something really nasty happening to somebody far, far away. And that's sort of what a coming of age story is.
I know. Peter, the great British actor Peter O'Toole once said that his idea of adventure was carrying a pint of bitters from one smoke-filled room into another one. Which, if you like bitters, and this, of course, is back in the days when rooms were smoke-filled because everybody smoked, which I remember. People today, often youngsters especially, don't realize what it was like back in the day. Anyway,
I think we're running low on time.
Yeah, I know. We're starting to run out of time. What I guess I want to, Paula, you got some, because you've been unnaturally.
Yep, I'm good.
Huh?
I said, I'm good. I'm sorry, I don't have good internet here. So while I can see you and hear you, you may have problems seeing and hearing me. Because my internet out here in the very far boondocks is limited.
Yeah,
well, that's good.
Yeah, we've had some interesting times, haven't we, Gord?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I live in metropolitan Chicago. Gord does too now. In fact, he lives about 2 miles away from me. But Paula, who her husband Don moved quite a bit, is now, having been in reasonably civilized part of Florida, they are now back in their origins of Texas, Oklahoma area. And
well, my origins of Texas.
Oh, Don's from where?
It'd be worse if it was his origin.
He's from
what?
Kentucky, right?
Yeah, he's from Kentucky. It'd probably be worse.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, they're in a part of East.
Not that I don't love Kentucky, I really do. It's my favorite place, but you know, we were out in the boondocks there too.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, no,
We
you're
just do
actually.
boondocks. What can I tell you?
Well, look, we're going to have to wrap this up pretty quick, Paul. So is there anything you want to add to what we've talked about?
Nope. Just read the books. They're pretty good.
They really are. And the one thing you can, which may be good or bad the way you look at it, but these are books that where, like I said, the authors are pretty well unconstrained, because in this particular instance, one of the three authors is also the publisher. So, you know,
At least one of the three authors is unconstrained.
Or could convince me that something's fun. It's like, sure, what the hell? And we really are writing this series more to fun than really pretty much anything else, I'll be honest with you. I mean, it sells, you know, it sells fine, but I mean,
They are fun books and they're fun stories,
yeah,
which is probably why they sell so well.
yeah. I don't know. The first two books, Demons of Paris, has been out for a while. Demons of Constantinople just came out about, what was it, 2 months ago, I think?
Yep.
About
Something
that.
like.
The book that Gorgon Paula just finished, I don't have an exact publishing date yet. It'll probably be early next year, early 2021. But just, you know, just keep, well, I recommend people get onto our newsletter and mailing list, no matter what. You already are if you're watching this, but stay on it, because you will get every week news of what's happening, what's coming up, and, you know, what's forthcoming. So, you know, you'll know what's happening. And if you're worried about getting stuck, there's a little button at the bottom. If you decide you don't want to get anymore, you just push it and you're off the list. But I'd recommend you get on it and stay on it, because it'll keep you informed of stuff. In the meantime, Gorg and Paula have books of their own that are coming out fairly soon. Remind me, Gorg, what's the next one you guys got coming?
The next one is the next Holmes book.
Yes, it's a sequel. They have started a series of their own, which is part of the 1632 universe. And it's in the same setting that the three of us developed in Russia, beginning with a novel called 1636, The Kremlin Games, and then followed up by a novel which came out fairly recently called 1637, The Volga Rules. And we've had to sort of put that Russia plot line of the 1632 series, you kind of have to have it wait for a while, because it's gotten a little ahead of the rest of the series, and there's some developments that have to be depicted in some other books before we can really go much further with the main storyline we developed in those two novels. But in the meantime, Paula and Gorg have developed a really great story idea that they're going to be able to take separately. The first book came out a little while ago. It's called A Holmes for the Tsar. Holmes as in Sherlock Holmes. And they finished the second one, and the title right now is Two Cases for the Tsar. And this involves a very unusual woman who is actually a barmaid originally, but she has a sort of peculiar way of looking at the world that, as it turns out, makes her very, very good at solving mysteries. And so she winds up getting hooked up with a Russian engineer who's picking up all kinds of modern stuff because of the Ring of Fire. And the two of them are starting to become it takes place in Ufa, which is now the capital of the legitimate Russian Empire. And Tsar Mikhail Romanov is starting to use them as his sort of prize investigative team. This being an era when nobody's. But yeah, all right. What?
Okay, the third book, it will be A Mission for the Tsar.
All right, fine. All right, fine.
I just figured that out.
Anyway, these are short novels. They're a lot of fun to read. The first one came out. It has done very well. People like it. The next one is coming out pretty quickly. I've forgotten the exact date, but it's not for it'll be this year. 40 years up.
And the one after that is Space Race, which is in the Horsebell universe.
Right.
And it's a bunch of centerfolds using a combination of technology and magic to get into space.
Right. And then they are starting a young adult series that starts with a book called Honoria. Then that will be coming out next year. So there's a lot of stuff that they're producing that's coming out through Ring of Fire Press. And of course, they continue to write for the Gazette. They have a number of books out through Bain Books. It'll probably be a little while. Oh, wait, no, I take it back. I have written a novella with Gorgon Paula that is going to be part of the New World anthology that Bain will be publishing about a year and a half. That some of which have been discussed already at the convention in the panel that we had on what's happening in North America. And if you missed that panel, don't worry. Within a fairly short time, this entire convention has been recorded, and we'll be putting it up on YouTube. And I think we're also doing it on Facebook. I'm not the tech guy, so but I know we're doing it on YouTube. So you can see this, go back and see that panel. All right. We're out of time. So thank you very much for coming. And really, I'm serious. I know,
And we didn't get to any of the questions, so okay.
Yeah, well, we can't. Yeah, I know. We're not set up to handle a lot of questions. But I think people will enjoy these books, and especially if you buy them as ebooks, they're cheap. So you can try Demons of Paris, see if you like it, and if you do enjoy it, you can rest assured there will be more stories in that series coming. Next novel's already out. There'll be another story coming out, and then we'll go from there. All right. Thanks again.